To me, art direction is all about telling a story visually, creating a backdrop, creating environments to help characters evoke emotion, to help participants really buy into the story more.
A movie is a story, and you're illustrating the story. For that, you need scenery, you need ambiance, lighting, and of course the sound. So a production designer and the art involved essentially previews what's going to happen when the movie is finally shot, principal photography.
We're always telling a story, and it's character driven, so therefore we make sets that have to be lit and that have to be dressed. And most general films are about people. It's an environment that we're creating to show where the people are and what they're about.
My name is Evan Seckham. I'm a first-year graduate production design student here. The faculty I've experienced, given the smaller environment, is very much more one-on-one and very much more able to help out students on an individual basis. The last year or so has been just a great overall experience. I've done more sketching, more design research than I've ever imagined I'd be doing. 3D rendering, I've learned production illustration, I've learned how to draft and design for film sets on studio lots. I look forward to my second year where I get to actually crew a couple of thesis productions and hone in my skills as a production design student here at Chapman.
Hi, I'm Larry Paul. I'm the professor of production design here at Chapman University. Presently, we're exhibiting the annual production design showcase, which shows off the students' work in the graduate school, which includes various types of projects executed either with illustrations, models, or drawings.
So far I've had at least 4 films that I've had an opportunity to do the production design and art direction for, and I've had to work on a variety of things from building sets to just set dressing locations to trying to take a diner that is sort of a Jewish deli and make it look more like a 1950s diner. I've had to build a set that looks like an addict on 2 separate films, one for an addict from the 1940s and one from an addict from the modern times.
We're the people who read a script and imagine how it's going to look.
They create the vision, they get with the director, and you decide like what this film's about and what it's going to look like.
You do that with color, you do that with form, shape. You work in tandem with the directors and cinematographers to describe, what is it we're trying to evoke here? What are the key elements?
Is it a happy movie? Is it sad? Is it what are the colors of the movie,
And getting things built and painted and decorated and dressed with a whole other group of people. And that's translation process.
One of the important things about production design and becoming a production designer is, I think, a very simple thing. It's the skill of seeing, that you use your eyes and you see things. Now, and then you mentally record them in your memory so that when the time comes, you can draw back upon those memories and apply them to things you might read or things you might imagine. So that it's a very simple thing of training yourself to look at the world around you.
If you can think and you can see, then all other skills can be taught. You can learn them.
And the first word that I use to describe a successful designer is a true Renaissance personality. Someone who has the ability to cross over in many, many disciplines and have a fairly good knowledge about a lot of things. You have to be an architect, an engineer, an artist, painter, thinker type. You have to have all kinds of tools at your hand. You have to be a student of, as Joe's described, the world in terms of how everything looks. All of these things become part of your process, and so you have to have a great curiosity, I think, about the world and everything around the world and in the world and outside of this world to really succeed as a production designer.
I think a production designer has to be fearless. They have the luxury of coming up with these wild ideas. Any production designer that kind of holds back is hindering himself. And you know, I've worked with some who are just not afraid to go for it.
Everyone who's done the job will say to you at certain points, it seems to be about an inspiration that comes to you in spite of yourself. But you've primed the pump. You've been studying, you've been thinking about it. You're rolling around in its bed for hours, for days, for months, and then something will come to you.
Design is if someone can build anything. Because if you're super practical about it, then you might not be, you know, cutting edge, and you got to just go for it and let the experts come up with their way of building it, because they always do.
What has also been, language has been used to describe production design is alchemy, where we take that imagination, a thought, and now it becomes both a physical thing that then becomes the essence of a picture, of a photograph or a digitally recorded image. So it's a really interesting way to go from pure imagination into the physical world and then back into a more imaginary place.
And some of that physical reality is in the computer, and some of that physical reality is sets that people actually walk through, touch, stand in.
Production design and design in general is like a mental process that you think about constantly. You can design and design and design in your mind, and then you need to develop the skills to present those designs to people so that they can understand it.
For Professor Larry Paul, the production design workshop professor, he has us read scripts from feature films that have already been shot, filmed, famous ones like this one, for instance, is the floor plan for the hit pit from the Clint Eastwood movie $1 Million Baby.
The idea of storytelling and how that relates to the design process it's really crucial.
To really get the essence of the purpose of the work, the theme, it's very much about dramatic literature. And that is the foundation on which everything is built.
If you don't have a good story to tell, you will not be able to overcome that shortcoming. I mean, you can have the world's best production design and the world's best camera work, but if you're not telling a good story, you can't overcome it with the world's greatest production design. It has to be singing off the same page all together all the time.
I think the two most magical things that I've worked on or somehow had something were The Big Chill and Rain Man, because those two scripts were like, you could not put them down and reading them. There was just something about them. They were just like, could not stop reading them. And both those films were completely successful, you know, and there was some reason, there was something about them. And The Big Chill was the most fun to make in the world. It was my first film, and it came out so well. And Rain Man 2 was like, it was just, there was something about that movie. It was, I didn't even know it was going to be such a hit, but there was just something magical and incredible about the script and about doing it. The special feeling.
We tell stories in all different kinds of mediums. Even in a show like we do that's a beauty pageant. There is a competition and a story being told. And it definitely has a tone, it has an atmosphere, there's a new environment, so that we can guide our viewers, our audience, through the process and they can be entertained.
Yeah, I've done film, I've done theme park design, I've done themed resort design, I've done regular architecture. In a lot of cases, there is a lot of crossover in those disciplines. In most of the cases with the entertainment projects that I've been involved with, there's always an underlying story element that's there. There's always something that we're trying to convey. There's emotions that we're trying to evoke.
The entertainment industry, to me, is just, you know, a menu of how they're going to use your artwork and your design. And for me, it doesn't matter how they're going to use it. If I read the story, which is a script, or if it's a corporate promotional piece, it still is part of a story, and you just imagine why it has to be that way for that particular story.
We have to read the script, of course, and then break it down, figure out which sets are going to be most complicated and would need to be actual sets. We research what kind of style we have to, we'll design it in, and then we start drafting all the plans and the elevations.
Once we've read that material or had the conversation about what the project is, then begins the long and careful process of bringing those imaginary things in your mind into reality.
When you design the movie, you need to present a visual image as well, not just the drafting. You have to show the director some ideas. You have to say, okay, here's my ideas about what this film should look like. It's a slick, modern apartment. Here's some ideas, more than one. Then you have to get with the decorator, and we have to see what the furniture is. That's the next big important thing. Then you get with the decorator and you start pulling out everything, floors, chairs, carpets. Then you do those boards and you go to the director and say, here's our ideas about what the furniture looks like. And they're always done on boards. The director will say, hate it, love it, like this, don't like that. Then you start whittling it down more and more until you finalize the look of the film.
The first assignment, like a project I was assigned for come to this school, is the Frozen River. And this is my first sketch from my concept. This kind of trailer will represent she was trapped in that kind of harsh environment. My idea is that develop two sets. One is for exterior, the other one for interior. Interior will be built in the soundstage.
There's a few things that are going to be very obvious up front in certain sets. Like when we're on Mission Impossible, there's the IMF, the Impossible Mission Foundation, and it's their job to do, to be top secret. So you're not, that's not going to be a location somewhere. We're going to build that. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be a kick-ass looking set, lots of glass, lots of metal, and it's going to be the jewel of the film, and that's what everybody wants to design that part. You're going to do that on stage because you want full control of that environment as well. But then there's a lot of the ones there's a lot of things that are sort of, on that draw, they're on the line. They're on, not sure whether it's going to be on location or not.
And budget. I mean, if you're in a very small movie and you don't have money to build, then you won't build. But if you're on a regular movie with a decent budget and stars or actors that have a name, any kind of intimate scenes like that, that's for sure usually a build.
John Carter of Mars, that one was pretty much all location for me. We did stage stuff in London, and we did all the location stuff in Utah. So every set on that required some sort of road cut in, snow, mud, heat. Within the 6 months we were there, we went through everything imaginable to build a set. So location-wise, that was by far the most challenging.
Usually I found things just by instinct. You just go out there and start driving, clear your head, turn left, turn right. Location people are usually really good at their jobs, and they go out. I either go with them, or if I'm busy designing, they go out and then they bring back pictures and show me, and I will edit the pictures first and pick the ones that I like, then we'll go look at them. If they can't find something, I go out and just drive, and sort of it appears sometimes.
Would you like to pull up to a location and see that you don't have to build anything? That happens all the time. But it doesn't mean it's free. In the bigger scale, you have to get permits, you have to get police involvement, you have to get fire department involvement. Then you have to pay for that particular location, that street closure. If it's a period film on a contemporary street, you have to change out all your signage, you have to change it back at the end of the night. There's always going to be some cost to filming on a location, and then you design off of that particular palette.
And we drove around half a day, all around the dirt roads. I was just looking for something that A, was practical, which meant flat enough to be able to build a motel that we could stage the scene in, and B, fed me something more than that. And I'm always looking for something that gives you what the script calls for, but I'm always looking for something else to add on top of that enriches it, that deepens it, that gives it more color, more emotional vibrancy.
In Tokyo Drift, we had to put digital billboards in the second unit streets, and we had to make LA look like Tokyo. We couldn't shoot Shibuya, which is the huge thing you always see in movies, of the intersection in Tokyo. So we took a huge parking lot in LA and we built every line of the intersection, and we built everything up to about 2 feet. Every little bit of wood or grass or, every pavement curb, the whole thing. And then we raced the cars through it. And then the digital men were there with their rulers and their sticks. And they put the camera in position, locked it down, and then they did all their mathematics. We built them the set piece, we call it, walked away, and they put it in the film.
Something like Transformers, very involved in the beginning. The production designers designing the robots, at which point those get sent to ILM. They then build what you've designed. The idea that you have to work with them on specific sets and green screens, and in the end, a production designer may have to get involved with making sure that the whole look of the film is correct all the way through.
You almost never walk into any place and find it ready to go. Most of us are not making documentaries after all. Sometimes some stories lend themselves to a very spare kind of storytelling, which is almost quasi-documentary. But sometimes the things that you think on camera are essentially, you opened the door, walked in, put your stuff there, your camera and your sound equipment, and just put your actors in, and it was ready to go. That can be very deceptive because a lot of the time that has been carefully pruned, carefully added to, carefully changed, carefully manipulated, so that it feels that all you had to do was open the door and reveal the character or the environment or the situation. Because art, a great deal of art is about selecting and manipulating.
The best thing about working on film is that you can sit down and literally within 6 weeks you can draw something up, sketch it up, have a model built, and be kicking dirt around building something. And in another 6 weeks, it's finished, you're filming it, and then they're tearing it down. And there's nothing, that feels really good.
This is the artistic rendering sketch that I did. It's basically just to get the information across of the generic feel and look and furniture placement of the room.
We have our drawing and storyboarding class, which gives you an opportunity to flesh out production illustrations and keyframes of the particular set that you're working on for Larry Paul.
As you can see, I did an illustration. This was like an 8-hour illustration of just the landing area where the planes would be. And this was an outside, short, independent project done with the director or production designer of 24 that also brought me on as an illustrator. These were the illustrations that I did of a plane crash, which turned into the actual set.
Learn to draw. Learn to communicate your ideas visually.
Nothing exists on a white sheet of paper all by itself, ever.
Drawing in the computer, we use AutoCAD, we use Rhino, we use Photoshop, we use Maya, we use all kinds of different computer mediums to communicate ideas. But I think the essence is that if you don't know how to do it hand to paper, I think that's really where it starts, because that's where your comfort zone is.
I don't care what you're using as a tool. If you don't know how to draw, you can't draw, period.
It's the strength that you have to have.
I think it's the essence, it's the beginning of the communication process.
Whether you sketch badly or extremely well, it's certainly one way for you to order your own thoughts in a way that you can communicate them with other people.
If you can sit down and actually sketch something out for them to understand better what an angle is that you want to see, or a particular shade and shadow situation that you want to create to emphasize something about the character or about the set or the environment that you're in.
I read the script and I got the impression right away that this was a dismal, dystopian world, a city, urban landscape, oppressive, and that was the cue. I would get sort of a briefing either from Ridley or Lawrence and do 2 or 3 sketches, those gouache renderings, and I was working on 3 of them at a time. I'd have them all lined up because the color scheme was sort of dull, and Blade Runner is not a happy film.
Kind of monochromatic, right?
And so I'd be painting over here, and then I'd say, oh, that will go over here, and I'd do the side of the building and put some stuff over here. So I was doing 2 and 3 at a time. you can duplicate real life with fairly simple brush strokes. And if you look at some of the masters who do this, the fabric and the lace, and it's just little ticks of brush strokes. And it looks, if you know the right color, the right value, and the right relative to everything else in the picture, it looks real.
When I first started, I wondered how I was going to present the look of the movie to the director. Now, there's many ways to do this. Some production designers are brilliant illustrators. They do beautiful set sketches, like John DeCure was a brilliant illustrator. And I've worked with Dick Silbert, who was one of my mentors, and he also illustrated. I'm maybe not such a brilliant illustrator. I do watercolor still, even though I know it's the age of Photoshop. Also, I do collaging. I will have a conversation with the director and say, well, do you want a hallway to the bedroom? Do you want the bathroom to be practical? And get some ideas from him. And then I'll just start drafting it, and I'll draw something that I think is interesting. And from looking through these magazines, I get ideas. Is there an archway? Is there a glass partition between the dining room and the kitchen? You start collecting ideas from these books, and then you can just start designing whatever you want. It's kind of fun.
In our process, both John and I rely very heavily on sketches, and we hand draw and sketch back and forth to arrive at like a tonal quality and a look for something. We also can do clippings that we initially communicate with to make sure that we're all on the right page visually, and then we start applying these things and changing proportion and scale and material and color to arrive at collectively this final product.
You've got that camera to deal with. Where is it? Where is the lens? Where is the dolly track? How does it move? So you have to know how to draft, and because if you're building sets, walls have to wild. Which camera lens are you using? How much are they seeing?
Now Ridley, when I was working on Blade Runner, he only sleeps about 4 hours a night when he's on a picture. And he would do these little Ridley vids. And using television commercial paper with the gray background and little television shaped things, 4:3. And he would do little pen sketches. And that helped a lot because he could show them to Lawrence Paul, who would show them to me. And I'd say, Ridley has this thing with silhouette, layering of the picture in silhouette. And that's why I painted those little paintings, paying great attention to light source and stages, which I learned from years and years of doing this for different people. And I could paint the scene, put in the lighting, get the ambiance, and that's why I got along so good with Ridley, because I could actually conceive an entire scenario in full color. This particular one it showed the sedan that Deckard rode around in, and it showed the street garish color and the sort of the sex trade homage to that with a girl up in the bubble, and it's a sleazy part of town. I painted the color first, the green in the background, gradually stack up the detail and cut back into the areas and put cross shading and highlights and so forth. We called that style retro deco, or the one I made up was trash chic. That's the Blade Runner look.
Lately, my word is that I think sets are paintings, because how I end up doing them is like as I'm building them or even painting a location, it just comes together slowly, and all the veneers that I picked out, you start seeing them, and I keep painting the walls nearer and nearer the end, because then all the colors come together and then it gels. And with the wardrobe, I always try to tell the costume designer what the colors are going to be, and spend a lot of time talking to the costume designer right from the beginning, because that's the icing on the cake.
The production designer really is designing the production, and a lot of their work is just making sure the thing goes through the lens in an orderly manner, working with the line producer and all the people that are involved. So they really don't have to draw that with that skill level of an accomplished artist. They have to recognize how this production is being formed and how it's moving into a visual final format.
We're given the opportunity to learn 3D rendering programs and techniques using various 3D programs. These renders were created with Google SketchUp. We take the designs of our floor plans that are in the Larry Paul class, and then we flesh them out into a 3D environment, and we texturize, and we light it, and we make it look ready to be as if it's going to be pitched to a producing team or company to say, hey, this is our vision and this is how it's going to look in the 3D world.
Last one is the sketch of illustration. That one give the audience or viewer have a sense of texture, like a shiny surface, what kind of material we want to use for this space. We bring all of our drafting and the floor plan into a SketchUp, 3D rendering, add some more texture, color, let the director figure out what kind of environment they want to create.
Google SketchUp allows us to build the space in a 3D form that we can move the camera around like you would if you were on an actual set. So you can see both styles of how to get a point across of what a set will look like. Is you can do artistic drawings, you can also do 3D renderings in different programs, and there's a variety of tools that we learn to use to get the point across of what our design will look like when it's finished.
I think ultimately computer drafting is where it is now. Hand drafting is a beautiful art, but the manner in which you can change things on the computer makes it so much easier for everybody else to collaborate.
I think they need computer skills. I think they need CAD or whatever it is. And I know that people like, I think, Jim Bissell, who did 300, used this incredible program to, in 3D design his sets. And I wish I had that skill.
You have to learn the tool well enough so that it becomes not about manipulating the computer, it becomes about actually doing the work on the computer.
You can change stuff quickly. Then once you have it, you can turn that into drawings. You can pull drawings out of it, which is great.
So I can think in terms of scenario, 3D scenario, and as a matter of fact, if I'm doing a real critical rendering, I will actually do down views, side views, like designing a stage set.
Once you understand how you're spinning things in space, again, this mental process of visualizing, elevating, spinning them in space, and then drawing them, you can tear it apart and play with it, and ultimately, I think, arrive at a better design solution through the collaboration of all the different people, because we really have to be very cognizant of lighting and how that's all going to work, and the space that actors are going to need, and entrances and all of that kind of stuff.
I don't do three-dimensional software. Well, I do SketchUp for my architectural stuff, because you can rotate, and financiers and people have no visual skills whatsoever. But if you can rotate the little section of the restaurant, they can see it, the vendors can see it. So, but you still have to think three-dimensionally as a designer. Otherwise, you're going to be embarrassed by the back end not matching the side. That's not too cool.
10 years ago, everything was done on pencil. 10 years ago, I said to my assistants and set designers at Warner Brothers, we are going to buy computers and you're going to learn how to do this, and we use the Vectorworks technology. Now, I can't even find a pencil on their desk, but I was very tired of asking them, I think we need to make that wall 2 feet wider. And this would mean the eraser would come out and there would be erase, 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 and redraw. And it was not efficient.
Right.
And the flexibility of the computer, add 2 feet there, all of a sudden it was all smiles. I can do that. And they'd click, 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 and I'd have my 2 feet. Right. As opposed to slamming down the pencil and saying, I wish you'd have thought of that yesterday because I've just finished this drawing and now I've got to start over.
This is my creative thesis project called Fight Club. So Fight Club is very cool. If you haven't seen it, you have to see it. We have to choose four scenes from the script and design it. This one is the basement, and it's called Lost Tavern basement. This is where they fight. This is where the fight begins.
I had to do the courtroom for Chicago, the musical. If they need to wild out a wall and see what the camera angle looks like from a different perspective, the walls can move. And so this is actually a very, very good tool that you could design a set all day long and show pictures of what it looks like. But when someone actually sees a physical model, it makes such a big difference to know how big the space really is going to be.
I used several pictures to make a list set. List set was combined by the two pictures with different porch and the porch crochet and the variety of the roof angle. Make it more interesting in the old surface. It's my design idea.
We depend heavily on modeling. We model many times over and over and over again so that we can look at how the camera will perceive the environment and the space.
A project for film and television usually involves a fair amount of money. And there's a way that you see it in the 3 dimensions that is so useful to doing something then that will ultimately be revealed in 2 dimensions.
You can actually move stuff and put a camera in, and people will argue that you can do that on the computer also, but it's not. There is a difference.
The most difficult thing about three-dimensional modeling in the computer is that it does give you the ability to change lenses and go through and really frame views and give you potentially what the camera will see, especially if that film is going to be done a lot in CGI. But what it doesn't allow you to do is to walk into a room and present something, an idea, where multiple people can look at it and have input in a lot of different ways and really kind of bend down and see what they're, really get into it. You get a much more visceral reaction from people when they come into the room and they see a model like this, because everybody can look at it at the same time. They can all look at 100 different points of view at the same time. Whereas when you're presenting something that's computer generated, really, it is only what you want to show them.
When you bring a model to the experience, then everybody's looking at it and they're all part of a discovery process. And we find that it's much more useful, it's much faster. You get solutions more quickly to the challenges that might be in front of you.
An art director, you tend to get mixed up in some of the other aspects, the politics and some of the nuts and bolts of it. Whereas a set designer or a model maker, all you're doing is creating stuff that needs to be built and put on camera. So, Pirates is super fulfilling in the sense of, building the ships and some of the stuff on the island. And, The Dark Knight was great. Building the full-size bat pod, when you saw that on camera was like, yeah, fabulous.
Even in a very simple theatrical presentation like an award show, that what we always understand is if we have a 3-dimensional model that we can look at, we can instantly ascertain sort of technical necessities that we need, like backstage spaces, entrances and stuff, and you can hold it, point, and in a meeting, it's so much clearer than doing some kind of a walkthrough or a flyover, because once that, you can pause it, but you need to get into it sometimes and say, well, this is this and this is this. So, when later on we can see the American Music Award model, and we use that model extensively to place musicians and performers, et cetera, on the stage. This is also a screen that we put in, and the background for the host would be a screen. So the host announcer would be here. This background is changeable. The host would then throw to the performance. The reveal would go up in the air. Awards are accepted in the center stage, and this model then shows that we can use a full stage look by this pushes in, and we have the full width of the stage if we need a very large performance. This wall is mirrored, so when we go into one stage and cross shoots, the reflection of the screens completes the image so that we can say that we have a completed set look there.
The challenge is to work quickly through things so you don't end up too far down the road in terms of your investment of time and resources. So sometimes that's why we promote the use of a pencil and a napkin, because you can very quickly, do you mean something like this? And no, that's not, no, I need to have the stairs over here. Okay, fine.
I did a lot of costume work for this one, and because it was a period piece, I actually had a lot of fun with it, getting to go to antique stores and search for clothing and do research on clothing and learn as much as I could about what people would wear in the 1940s. And this was just supposed to be sort of the girl next door, and what I actually had to do is I had to completely reconstruct the dress so that it would actually fit our actress, who is a very, very thin frame. As you can see, here's a photo of her actually wearing it in the film with her co-star that was a World War II Army officer.
I started out doing research on 1945, the Battle of Iwo Jima, and I knew in reading the script the biggest sets that I was going to have to deal with were the crew quarters where the soldiers interact, the ready room where the missions are given. I spent 10 hours on the Midway aircraft carrier. just to have an idea of conceptualize what these soldiers, their environments look like.
The research process is really an integral part of every project that I've worked on.
Any film that gives me an opportunity to learn something about a subject that I know very little about is worth doing on some level. It's worth considering doing it.
When we were working on The Prestige and learning about, turn of the century London and what it felt like, and trying to figure out, well, what do we want to show? How do we want to convey what our story's about when it comes to London? Because there's a lot of different things about turn of the century London visually that you could draw from. And I think the key is to try to understand the period a little bit. So one of the first things we do is a lot of research about, okay, what's London? What was London? What did it look like then? How did people get around? When you're walking on the street, where did you walk? Was it mud? Was it stone? So you learn a lot about the environments of those times, and then you try to pull out of that things that help you tell your story better.
I think every good production designer has a pretty darn good library backing them up.
I worked on a film called Serenity where it was supposed to be the Wild West in space. So we drew a lot from the Wild West, in a sense that a lot of the sets you'll see there are dusty, ghost town feeling places that are out on some other planet somewhere. And it was specifically done that way because we wanted it to feel like you're on the edges of, as far as the humans have traveled thus far, we're really kind of out there where there aren't any more rules, sort of like the West was. And whether that'll actually ever exist, who knows? But I think that it helps lay an environment for your characters to act within, and it helps give you grounding in some really critical story elements.
Sometimes you collect research and you stuff your head with research so that when you are running around in the real world, you have a way of judging whether what you're choosing is correct or not. And sometimes you look at wallpaper, say, and you spread out a dozen of them on the floor, and you're thinking about a certain character and a certain place, and you're trying to come to some conclusion about which wallpaper expresses that character and that time and that emotion of that scene best. And you can't come to the conclusion right away. You set them out, you look at them, you go home, you go to bed. Sometimes in the middle of the night you wake up and you have an image of one of those wallpapers. It's as if the thing is speaking to you through you. You are a cipher, and and your job is to be the happy shaman. Your job is to find what it is that's going to make the story tell itself best.
Part of the learning culture here that I've experienced is it's a very stressed and important aspect of the learning here at Chapman University is actual on-set production of student films. They mandate that you crew in the production designer role at least 2 senior thesis films. It's a very collaborative effort between all students. Even though we're working on our own projects, we learn from seeing what the other kids are contributing because we're always meeting in the same place and we're always bouncing ideas off, and we're seeing how other things are getting done from other kids' perspectives.
Collaboration is a skill, and it is something that you need to study how it's done, because you can't become defensive in the process. You can't become offensive in the process, because what we do really relies on a group of people coming together to make the final project, and everyone has to participate to get to that point. So collaboration is a very, very important element of the entire process.
You need to command some degree of respect and exhibit some degree of intelligence, because after all, you have to have people who follow you, who believe you, who are convinced by what you think and feel. So I always said that that's one of the first strengths that you need to bring to the table is communication skills.
Production designers are responsible for everything. You hire all these people for the costumes and the props.
You have 2 or 3 illustrators potentially. You have set designers that are there to basically draft up and design the set so that construction can build something. You'll have art directors that will be working with you that are each maybe in charge of a set.
And we decide what's build, what's location, and sometimes the locations change or the builds changed, or we can change multiple sets into one and just kind of mix them around. When you have to sit with paint, plaster, construction, set deck, video playback, all these people, and that's your job as an art director, is just to make sure that everybody has what they need at the end of the day to be able to deliver a set.
Like he takes my drawings of the set and I go, here's what I want. And then he redefines that drawing. And then he brings me, I say I want modern hardware, and he'll go out and bring me 50 samples and I'll pick it. And then I go off to the set and see if the director's happy, see what he needs for the next day, maybe ask some questions about future sets, bring him sketches, find a way to talk to him which isn't disturbing him, have the timing be right. You can be very gifted in doing the drafting and the art and all that stuff, but if you can't bring it across, if you can't have that sort of way of getting along with the director, that kind of, I don't know what it is exactly. A lot of art directors don't want to be production designers, and they could be, they're very gifted, but they want to stay at the desk. They don't want to deal with all that other stuff, the sort of dog and pony show, I call it,
Because you're going to be the ham in the sandwich frequently between the director, who wants everything that he or she wants for the story, and the producer, who would like to spend nothing for it, or the studio, whoever that might be. And you're the ham in the sandwich. You will be gnawed from above and bitten from below, and you have to have a good alligator hide and some sharp teeth and a very heavy tail some days to be able to just crawl through that swamp and come out of it safely and with some sense of a grin on your face that you were able to carry it off.
These are our Emmys, and we have won 6 times. There's more than that there because Joe gets 1 and John gets 1.
I arrived at this career by a series of accidents, happy or otherwise.
So I went to architecture school, and I had a lot of interest in art and painting.
And what I really had imagined that I was going to do was design exhibits in museums.
Corporate design.
Theme park design.
Eames Furniture.
From PA into models.
I wanted to be a painter.
And just to keep busy, you sort of, you start plate spinning, you start doing a lot of different things. You try to find out, where your heart is at.
And eventually you arrive where you're going to go, but you don't go straight there. And I didn't come straight to the film business. It was just something that happened.
The other thing that I did was I used to I still do, I like to read a lot. What I had never done was read the literature that tells the stories of plays and things like that. So I had to sort of shift my focus and begin studying drama.
How do you read literature? How do you read between the lines? How do you understand storytelling?
We would have these kind of great projects where you would take a great story and then kind of mess with the setting, like set Romeo and Juliet in 1860. So you would have to apply, a foreign design style to whatever you've ever seen this thing. It wasn't like a Renaissance, it wasn't Italian, it was American. And you'd have to tell the story of the Capulets and the Montagues as one would the North and the South.
When you come to the film business with skills both having to do with the nature and meaning of storytelling and the nature and meaning of design, those two things usually help you railroad yourself into the art department.
It's such a hub of movie people here. And when I say movie people, I mean commercial, I mean low budget, big budget, TV. The idea that Southern California is the hub of the industry is great because you just have so many different options.
The single most important element about getting an education to become a production designer is that you really have the chance to succeed and fail, over and over again and get some practice done. And you're exposed to the opportunity to really learn and explore use your curiosity to explore the world. And boy, it's such an efficient way to learn things because you have teachers and people who guide you and tell you what you need to know. It's so much faster than trying to learn it all on your own. A production designer really has to have the skills of all of the people who work for him in the end. So that if it's a small project, obviously, you do it all yourself. Classic theatrical training means you design the set, you decorate the set, you draft it, you pick out the colors. You may even have to paint the set. You sit through the rehearsals with the director, you work with the cast, you work with the props, you do all of those things. Now, of course, that the bigger the project becomes, the more help you need in all of these areas. You really have to be able to communicate with these people, and to some level, you have to be able to also be capable to doing their jobs to some level.
You become a better art director, production designer, if you know from the ground up how the art department works, how the construction works, how do other departments work. You're not always going to be able to have a budget who can carry 20 people in an art department. So at that point, you have to be able to do the job that you used to do.
Because I was taught how to think about designing something rather than knowing how to design a thing. And there's a big, big difference.
I tell young people, you can't cram it all in 4 years. So you've got to give yourself, during those 4 years, the real foundation for your career as you go into the future.
It's more a question of discovering something about yourself and what you're good at and what you like to do, and then meeting the right master at the right moment.
The knowledge that I could get here, like in set design and production design, was invaluable and couldn't get it anywhere else.
We actually get more experience, I feel.
My professors have been really helpful. They have guided us through the way.
We have to wear a lot of hats when we're on set, and so I've had an opportunity to, paint places and design costumes and set dress and do, I think, probably a little bit more than most of the other emphasis get to do.
I expected so much, but I didn't know how much I was going to get, and I was just blown away for the 2 years that I was here. I was challenged from the day I got here. It was just a collaborative experience for me to be able to do this thesis that took me 8 months, and I finished 2 months early, and now I'm graduating. So it's been a great experience to come through Chapman.